Hey friends, it's Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and today will be my last day talking about this Cavalcante case. I know I got a little bit obsessed about it, but it really preoccupied me, and to the point where I was listening to 24/7 almost coverage. The only time I wasn't watching coverage on it was when I fell asleep. So I'm really glad it's over because I couldn't take much more of that. And the poor people who were in those communities, they must have really, I know they were terrified. At any rate, I said that I wanted to reverse engineer the two readings that I did on the topic, because I felt it would be instructional and helpful to, not just do tarot readings and show how I would interpret a situation, but to see what I missed, right? Or how things might have been interpreted differently. So I just thought that would be interesting. Now, the first the first spread that I'm going to show is the reading I did most recently, which was yesterday. I'm just going to show the cards. I'll remind you of the question, and we'll see what aspects of these cards panned out or didn't, or that, maybe they have yet to be revealed. I was waiting until later today to do the video because I was hoping that in the meanwhile, certain points would be made public, but it may be never, or it may be months before we know all the ins and outs of things that, the law enforcement may be keeping close to their vest. Okay, so let me flip the camera and we'll look at the video I did yesterday. Okay, so the video I did yesterday, to give credit to the deck, I used the Nicholas Conver tarot deck created by Artisan Tarot. I just want to give them a shout out. I like to give shout outs to the decks that I use. I use the Artisan decks, with some frequency. So I'm glad I have an opportunity to showcase them. The most compelling, the question yesterday that I put was, what could we do collectively to help or to assist law enforcement? Now, as I expected, it pretty much spoke of and it addressed what I kind of thought going in, because I kind of went into a rant yesterday about how frustrated I was that individuals were leaving their property open and not secured, to the extent where, the guy was able to steal a van because keys were in it, and he was able to walk off with a gun because the garage was left open with a loaded gun sitting in the corner. So, there was some frustration on my part when I did that reading. And I think this really does show, that aspect of, collectively, all of us need to put an end to, or finality to, giving him opportunity. I mean, the fact that these two cards, and I interpreted them, and the suit of coins can be I interpret the suit of coins as being well-being, right? Because they reflect, I think, the things that money can buy. So well-being could be a nice house. Well-being could be money in the bank. Well-being could just be, a nice lifestyle, an education, the things that money can buy. And it looked like, because they were together in a row, and that the 8 is almost 3 times actually exponentially larger than the 3, it was like, don't allow that to happen. And I think, I think the way I interpreted it, or the way I understood it, was accurately answering the question. But I do want to touch on how 2 cards appeared in both spreads, and I'll lay the other spread in a minute. The female Pope and the Death card. Now, the Death card was in this spread was the final quintessential card of the whole spread. So I was beginning to think that he would have been caught on the 13th day, which would have been yesterday, which is when I did the thing, when I did the reading. So I was thinking, oh, well, maybe he'll be caught on the 13th day. That'll be kind of great, right? But as it turns out, today is September the 13th. So I don't know. I mean, I think this is a good case in point where sometimes tarot cards can address and mean multiple things at the same time, right? It could mean that he is going to be found on the 13th or, on the 13th of the month. We can't discount numbers. I mean, numbers are a big part of tarot, right? I mean, what do you have with playing cards and tarot cards? You have images, you have suits, and you have numbers. And I don't think we should discount the value of numbers. And when a number is assigned to a card, and the card pops up, especially if there are multiple occasions of that number, you pay attention to it. And for this to have been a final outcome card, it could have been speaking of more than one way to see this card. It could be seen as put an end to opportunity. We need to all collectively, we have men and women here, right? We have two women in positions, this one in a position of authority, this one a different type of authority, and these two fellas, right, in positions of authority. So, listen to the authorities and minimize his opportunity. And I interpreted it as minimize or end it because the death card popped up. So end the opportunity. However, as it turns out, he was also caught on the 13th of the month. Now, as far as the woman goes, why there were, why this woman appeared in both spreads, I think she was being used as collectively, men and women, all of us need to do this. But it's also possible, and I'll address it in the next spread that I show, that she might have been appearing for a different reason. So let me lay the other cards down, and we'll talk about that spread. Okay, and for this spread, I used a new favorite, the Hess 1750 Tarot of Marseille, put out by Giordano Berti. And for the quintessential card, the final card, I just pulled a card from the Besançon deck by El Meneghello. Okay, so for this spread, the most compelling feature of it was that the spread began and ended with the same card. Began and ended with the Tower card. And I had commented how interesting it was that one deck, had the action from the sky coming in from one direction, and then the final card, just coincidentally, because I just picked a random deck, had the action, the divine action coming from the other side of the sky. So, and I commented a couple times that it ended the way it began, which, I wasn't sure exactly how that might have been interpreted. It could have been interpreted that he was going back to prison. It could have been interpreted as he was found in a building, he certainly was, he escaped from a building, right? He escaped from the roof of a building. So that was kind of interesting. So, I wasn't exactly sure how we might interpret it, but when I literally said it ended the way it began, I guess it makes sense. He went back to prison. Now, the other thing that is interesting, the other card that was in the other spread was the female pope. And interestingly, the sword pointed up to her, which I hadn't caught when I did the first video. And I was waiting today to see what information we might get about women, any woman, to see if Pope Joan played a role in this, in this reading. Now, it could have been that he did disguise himself. He changed his look. I was thinking like he looked so young and he was such a small person. I was thinking, well, maybe he'll disguise himself like a girl. If he gets his hands on women's clothes, he could walk down Main Street and, if he shaved his face, which he did, he could actually like walk down Main Street and maybe nobody would really know it was him, But as far as I know, it didn't come to that. The other thing is when I did this spread, we didn't know what kind of assistance or what kind of help he might have been getting, if any, from people. And it still isn't really clear. I know we had a sister in the area who has now been deported, or she's in the process of being deported. And she's being deported because although, I think she helped in getting him, I think she helped in some degree towards getting him convicted. But when the time came to help them find him, I think she declined to help. And so I think they said, oh yeah, well, guess what? You're going back, which, that's the way life works, I guess. So I don't know what role the female Pope played. Could it be just that, he was going to change his looks or be aware of the fact that he would change his looks? Or could it be that because this pointed to her, could it be that he was going to get assistance from a female figure? I know his mother played a role in having her voice, saying something to him in his language, which he didn't seem to take heed of. When I originally interpreted this spread, though, the way it struck me initially was not to read. The only card that I read with significance was the Tower, because it was echoed at the end. So I read this one with, well, he escaped from the roof of a tower, the roof of a prison. But when I saw the other two cards and when I saw it as a row of triumph cards, it struck me more as just the level of intensity and importance. It's like this row has the most importance, indicating that it's an extremely important case. So I didn't really get too involved with what those other cards meant other than a case of extreme importance. I mean, it occurred to me that maybe temperance could have had something to do with water. Look at water. I know there were like streams and brooks in those areas, so maybe he was following the water. And maybe as time unfolds, we'll learn a little bit more about some of these specifics. Maybe they were following streams. Maybe the rains were instrumental in finding him or not finding him too, because we did have a few rains. Okay, this row I think very clearly was him. A person of diminutive stature, prone to violence, and then the Devil card indicating that he was, not a nice guy, right? And then the final row, I just saw as authorities, us having a happy conclusion that he would be captured, that there would be probably no innocent lives taken because these two cards were together. So the end would come about in a way that would make us happy. Now, some people might have been happy to, that if he were killed, but I was the one who requested the reading, and I preferred that he would have been captured alive, although I wouldn't have lost sleep if he wasn't, because this was a choice that he made, right? To live violently like this, you live by the sword, you die by the sword, right? But, the reason I prefer that he wouldn't have died is because of what information we might get from him if he decides to be, helpful in, sharing some things. There's nothing in it for him to share, with authorities. He'll never have a lighter sentence. He'll never see freedom. The most he could ever hope for is what he's going to get, But I guess there's always a chance that we can learn some stuff. Maybe we'll learn some insights. And then also, it never would have occurred to me, because this was not the quintessential ending card. It was just the quintessential card in this particular row about, the authorities getting, I guess, an upper hand on the situation, And then my wish, or our collective wish, being fulfilled, that he would be caught or killed. And then I interpreted these two together as that no innocent lives would be taken, which is fortunately what happened. And then the quintessential card of the whole spread was the Tower. So he's going back to prison, which I never would have seen. I never would have suspected that. I thought, let me flip the camera. I for sure it wasn't going to go down like that. I thought for sure he would, he would really fight. He did have a gun. Oh, and he got a gun, which also added to the middle row of violence, right? I mean, he had a gun. He was prepared to be violent. And that was brought about because people didn't lock and secure their property. Because people, I guess, are in disbelief. They can't believe that something could happen to them. But when you're being told to take precautions, I think you probably should trust the authorities. I know people have a hard time with authority, but if somebody came around here and they were like within a mile radius of my house, I wouldn't open the door for anything until he was caught. You know what I'm saying? So, everybody's different, I guess. But so I think that's it. The only card I never really spoke about was the Wheel of Fortune, which was the end card of the top row. And I really, just generally thought of that as things going the way they were going. Sometimes he'd get lucky and sometimes we'd get lucky. And it would be like a cat and mouse game of who had the upper hand today, And like I said, time will perhaps shed more light into other details. Like there's a few details about this that I would really be interested to know. Now, like I mentioned, I had been watching the feeds, like maniacally. I don't know why. I guess because it was in my area generally, not in my immediate area, but in the area where people, where I grew up, for one, and then the area where I still have people there, and just blowing my mind that this could happen there. And so I began to fixate on like YouTube channels. When you watch the news, you see nothing. You can watch the evening news and you can watch the big channels, and you don't really see anything. But when you put on the YouTube channels, you get some people who are crazy, right? And so they would go out and they would go out to the locations and they would camp up and they would set up and they would stay there until their cameras died. And they would take 2 or 3 cameras, and they would film and video and walk around. And so when one of them wasn't airing, I'd find another one that was. So I think I watched JLR Investigates. I watched Grizzly. I watched Fox 29, which is a local guy, and he seemed to have, of all the mainstream media, Chris from Fox 29 seemed to be the one who was most similar to these other guys. I mean, he ended when his shift ended, but he did what they did. I mean, he went to those locations and he really kind of gave a mainstream YouTube kind of presentation. So I watched him, and there may have been 1 or 2 people, but then, and I would watch it until I fell asleep, and then when I would wake up at 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning or whatever time I woke up, I'd put them back on and see what was going on. And it's interesting because last night, I don't remember who I was watching, but around 1 o'clock in the morning, I don't remember if it was T-Rev 757. Yeah, I'm not sure. But last night around 1 o'clock or maybe midnight or something like that, I think it was T-Rev. He was the only one on. So I put him on, and I, because everybody else signed off for the night. And there was some, he played some scanner stuff. And there was somebody who said on the scanner, that there was like a heat detection, or there was something noticed, right? And so we were alerted, like on Pfizer Road, there was talk about Pfizer Road. I think it was Pizer Road or Pfizer Road, something like that. So there was kind of like talk about that, right? And then the next thing you know, it ended. It just was like the scanner went dead. So I was like, well, that was strange. The scanner went dead. So then that was that, and I kept watching it, and I fell asleep. When I woke up this morning around 5 or 6, I was like, well, surely they found him, right? So I turned it on at like 5 or 6, or I think it was like around 6, and there was nothing. He hadn't been found. So I continued to watch, I think it was T-Rev, because nobody else was on, So I watched him, and as I'm listening, over the scanner, he put it on the scanner so we could hear it, just hear in general anytime anything came in, and they were like, suspect in custody, confirmed. I was like, wait, we're like, what? So I like banged my husband. I'm like, it's over. They caught him. And he's like, no. And I'm like, yeah. And they said it a couple times on the scanners. I was like, wow, I know. Now I know that they got him. And so that was amazing. And it was amazing to hear it in real time. I didn't, because I invested so much of my time on this case, it was kind of amazing for me to hear it as it was happening. I thought that was really cool. Oh, and the other thing about a female, and maybe being a part of it, aside from, his mother and his sister who played a role, there were women, I think, in the course of the week. Like there was a woman, I think on Monday night, I think it was like Monday night, she was driving down the road and she saw him on the side of the road. And I remember hearing that too, like somebody saw him on the side of the road. They used the pronoun she, so it was a woman because she went forward and they referred to her as she. She made a U-turn when she could and came back to see if she could find him, but by then he had like snuck under, because I guess he saw that somebody might have seen him. And that was a woman, and she was driving by herself, and she had the moxie to turn around and see if she could see him again. So these are all the unsung heroes that we may never hear of, and we may never know their names, but and of course, I think the men were the ones who went in and well, the dog, the dog stopped him from progressing, because when they found him, he was asleep and he didn't really know. They got him unaware. And then once he was aware that arrest was imminent, he tried to get away, and he tried to crawl away. And he tried to get away with the gun, which meant that, he was going to get away with the weapon. So they put the dog on him, and the dog gave him a grip on the head, and that kind of stopped. I'm sure if you had like a big dog like that grip you in the head, it would stop you in your tracks too. But at any rate, I just thought it was fascinating. And I hope that the reverse engineering of both of these readings, both of these spreads, helps see, like certain things, it did play out pretty well. It's amazing to me how well, these cards spoke. And how, I was able to, I think, understand what they were saying. But I just really wanted to see, what I could have done differently or understood differently. And I think the one thing that would have been was to recognize that the number 13 might have played a role, right? Now, one of the other things that I thought of, I didn't mention, was with the 16 occurring twice for the tower. I thought, well, maybe, and since the tower was the final card, I was beginning to think that he would get caught on the 16th. And so I was thinking, well, he's going to get caught on the 16th, and that's kind of what was in my mind, because I was figuring, well, that's the final card. That'll be on the 16th, but that's not what it was. He was caught on the 13th, which makes sense in this row, because we have for the first card was the king, who's looking at stability, right, of well-being, stable well-being. The wish fulfillment card, so it's like the authority was making it happen, right, making him get caught. And then the 13th, you know, being the final card or the death card, it could have just meant bringing an end to the solution and making it a peaceful solution, because that was what I was hoping for, and it was next to the wish card. But I also assumed that this could have meant, you know, his death. But I did interpret it as no one innocent being killed because it was next to the wish card. And I guess it makes sense that this was in this row, because this is what brought an end, right? It brought an end to the whole case. And then he ended up back where he started. At any rate, so I think in the future, moving forward, especially if, you know, maybe I'll do other readings like this. If you were engaged and you thought this was interesting, please let me know. Because maybe if I get obsessed about another true crime case, I'll do them. I'll do public readings like this, and then we can reverse engineer or other instances where we might all be familiar with a scenario or a story, and then we can reverse engineer it when it's all said and done to see what we might have missed. Right? I think that's a valid way to learn insight. Anyway, friends, thank you for bearing with me. So glad it's over, and now we can get back to our happy little lives. Until next time, friends, peace and stay well.